Peter Parker who? Not my Spider-Man. No, no, no. The true new Spider-Man is Miles Morales, baby. Miles Morales, baby. We going to the moon. Sell your AF15's. Get rid of them. Get in a cash position so you can acquire all of the Ultimate Fallout 4s hitting the market right now. Because in this video, we got to talk about Ultimate Fallout 4, the Into the Spider-Verse film, and the craze that is surrounding the comic book market right now for that book. And then later on in the video, we got to talk about how the pendulum seems to be swinging. And I mean that in a double entendre sense. But before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things I would appreciate. But let us get into this video here today. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about. One, we got to do a market report about Ultimate Fallout. We got to talk a little bit about the, fervor surrounding the Weekends movie, everything going on in that, and then some of the values of the books, and then ask ourselves the question, is now a good time to buy this book? What do we think that the future projections of this thing are actually going to be? And how do we think that the movies are going to be affecting things? And then the other part, which I think is probably the more valuable part that I'm going to talk about at the end of the video, is this idea of what is happening in the behaviors of the market. How is the market starting to react to a few, what we're seeing, pretty darn good movies in a row, and how that is actually affecting the nature of buying and selling in the comic book hobby. But let us first get into the main topic today, and that, of course, is Across the Spider-Verse, coming out this past weekend, setting the world on fire, opening to a huge $120.5 million box office. That is just the US domestic. I'll just scroll down here and read a little bit of this article just to give it a little bit of context, and then we'll get into the comic book specifically. The sequel opened to $120.5 million in North America, well ahead of expectations, and the third biggest opening ever for an animated film, as well as the best ever for Sony Animation, not adjusted for inflation. It's also the second biggest opening of 2023 to date. The movie, which easily come in at number one, boasts both stellar reviews and audience scores. Across the Spider-Verse also flexed its muscles overseas, opening to $88.1 million from 57 markets for a worldwide of $208.6 million. And just to put that into perspective, I'll scroll down a little bit and we can say that the 2018 one, the first version of this movie, opened only to $35.6 million and then finished out with a worldwide of $384.2 million, and that was widely considered a massive success. And basically in one weekend, we're already over halfway there to the box office of the first film, which definitely goes to show that this movie is absolutely going to blow the first box office out of the waters, and this is definitely going to have a very, very successful run. And of course, with that comes the Ultimate Fallout 4 craziness happening out there in the market. Of course, you guys know Ultimate Fallout 4 from 2011. This is the first appearance of Miles Morales Spider-Man, a book that has been very heavily correcting for the better part of a year now, and is starting to finally see an uptick that, it's so desperately needed if you were somebody who was a buyer in 2021 or was a holder of this particular book. But you can see right here, let's take a look at some of the charts again. I talked about this a little bit in the previous video, how we have basically been on the decline since the market correction in March of 2022. Once the Fed started to turn on the interest rates, or it started to increase them, this book has been on the decline to now we're getting that little bit of a lift out there in the market, with this little bit of the uptick over the course of the last weekend. And this is something that I think is the most interesting part to talk about. Now let's go in here to GPA and talk a little bit about the 9/8 and just kind of show you guys a few of these numbers. And then I want to talk a little bit about sort of the market behavior with this one right here, where here we see June 5th, and June 4th. This is basically the weekend's numbers. If we kind of group them together, we can see a few $2,000 ones in there. We can see a $1,900 and then a $1,650 versus prior to the movie coming out. If we just kind of group, let's just say the end of May and the beginning of June, we do see a couple twos every now and again, but I see more 16s, 18s, and 19s. And then previous to that, we see some 15s in here, and then all the way down here, we can even see some 17s and 16s. I think early May was probably the lowest point for this book, or at least when it was competing to, prior times in November, where this book was also seeing lows like everything was in the comic book market. So here is the question, though. Here is the ultimate question, the Ultimate Fallout 4 question. Is now a good time to buy this book? Probably not. Probably not. You know, we've talked about here on the channel multiple times before of this idea of, macroeconomic factors. We've been studying our index. Granted that this is a modern comic book, but I would say that it's very likely that the value of this book moves in tandem to that of the index charts we've been looking at. In fact, actually, if you just look at that 9/8 graph, it basically follows like clockwork. The graphs that we've been seeing. So I do think that the theory would be that in Q3 and Q4, as we continue to be in tough economic times, after the height of this movie, after the hype has passed, I do think that we will see the floor values of that start to come down a little bit. I mean, maybe not so much in the buy it now prices. I mean, I think that there's going to be enough people who even though there's a ton of copies, there's a lot of people that are going to have this book. They're just going to refuse to sell it for whatever $1,500. I mean, I feel like if you're already bought into the book and you believe in this character, and there's the knowledge that there's going to be another part or part 2 of this movie coming out next year. So there's sort of a light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of the sellers of this comic book, thinking, you know what, I can just hold this till next summer and get the price that I want. So I don't think that the buy it now prices will dip below probably that $1,500 level, but I do think every now and again there's going to be some auctions that squeak through at the end of the year below that, because any given sale, any given day, and this is the type of book that is always going to be on sale. So I do think that it's probably not the best time to buy it. But what I think is the most interesting, as far as the conversation that we're having here, is I do think that there is it's very, very telling that coming off of this movie, and that it's being so successful and people being so excited about this, that there are people willing to pay above the $2,000 price point. I think that is the most interesting thing, and that is really where I'm getting at with the pendulum starting to swing. I made the inference that the pendulum is swinging from Peter Parker fans to Miles Morales fans. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious about that, although that is also kind of an interesting discussion as well. But really, what I mean with the pendulum swinging is the behaviors of the comic book market. For the last, 6 months or so, we've been seeing people dumping during movies, right? When the movies have come out, the fan response has been very, very poor, and people have been, selling all the way through the movie to the point where, the price was actually going down during the release of the film. We saw that with Thor: Love and Thunder. We saw that all during She-Hulk. We saw that, with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. All of these things, kind of playing that effect. But the last couple of films that we've gotten, specifically in the superhero space, if we're thinking about Guardians of the Galaxy, what did we start to see? We actually started to see sales trend upwards through the movie. So, for instance, with Thor 134, people actually watched the High Evolutionary's performance, and now there's actually higher sales for that book after the film than there were before the film, which I think is very interesting. People seeing the movie and going like, oh, cool, I actually really like this character. Oh, I may want to get this book. Similar people are actually thinking, hey, I really, really like Miles Morales. I really like this movie. Maybe I should go pick up this book. But ultimately, I think we are starting to witness the difference in market behavior where people are having that renewed faith. And I do think that eventually that will start to trend into the opposite direction of the pendulum, right? Where now all of a sudden people are going to be thinking, hey, this movie's coming out next year. My faith has been restored. Maybe I should start to speculate on some of these books once again. Hey, the trailer drops for this movie. Maybe I am going to buy off of the trailer because the trailer looks really good. But before I finish up that talking point, I just kind of want to show you guys a few other interesting things about Ultimate Fallout 4, and we can have this conversation about it. Now, of course, here we go into eBay, the sold listings. I mean, whatever it is, the second print, the first print, 9/8s, 9/6s, 9/4s. You can see tons and tons and tons of sold items for this book. A lot of that second print is being sold. I mean, that's one of the problems and one of the scary parts about, Miles' books is that there's a lot of competition out there, for a lot of his key books. I mean, and we're not even talking about his second appearance. We're not even talking about, the first time he meets Peter Parker. There's a lot of interesting Miles keys. So there's a lot of competition, but you can see that there's definitely a, interest and a fervor of people wanting to add Miles books to their collection. Now, the other side of it is that if you go in here and you sort by newly listed items, you have to understand that with the newly listed items, there's always going to be people looking to sell their comic books, looking to sell their Miles books. There's quite a few newly listed items. I have it searched by, Ultimate Follow specifically, but if you just kind of broaden it out to a lot of different Miles books, there's always going to be an influx of inventory, and that's always going to offset, the moonshot factor because of the whole supply and demand equation. In fact, one of the things I think is really interesting is if I go in here and I sort by, sold items, we can go down here to one of the 9/8 that sold at auction recently, just the other day. Where did I lose my place here? All right, here we go. A few auctions that went on sale on eBay here that ended just the other day. You can see one of them was for a 9/8, sold for $2,105, 30 bids out there in the market. And then later on in the day, you would see another one would finish at $2,354 with 37 bids, right? And this is, of course, we can say is June 4th right here of 2023. But I want to show you guys something interesting. If I just go onto eBay today and sort buy it now CGC 9/8, well, what do I see? A new listing right here in a CGC 9/8 for $2,000 with a best offer. So maybe this person right now would take $1,900. Maybe they would take $1,850. Similarly, if I go down here, we see another one, $2,125 with a best offer, newly listed CGC 9/8. So those people that won those auctions already paid a higher price than that is being offered right now for the newly listed books that have actually best offer available. So again, it just goes to show there's always going to be an influx of the inventory. So it's going to be hard for this book to maintain any sort of high level for an extended amount of time because there's always going to be people looking to sell their comics. And that's really one of the things that you have to decide. If you're somebody out there who has this book and you're trying to figure out, do I want to go to the moon? Do I want to hold this book? If you can sell into the hype, that might be the right thing to do so. And then if you want to buy, an auction later on in the year, one that slips through the cracks, you might probably will be able to buy it back for a lot cheaper. Now, the other one that is really interesting to talk about is Ultimate Follow 4, the Georgevich variant, specifically here in the 9/8 grades. This is one that if I personally had this book, I would definitely sell it. This one worries me quite a bit because of the fact that all you have to do is rewind the clock to early 2020 when this was a $3,000, $4,000 book or so. And now all of a sudden it's worth, upwards of $43,000, most recently $33,000. And there was a comic link auction that just finished around the $31,000 range. I mean, we're talking, essentially, 5x of the value for this book right here for a lot of holders. I mean, if you're somebody who owned this book anytime in the past, 4, 5, 6 years, I feel like you'd be kind of looking a gift horse in the mouth if you didn't actually take the profits for this thing because of the fact that there's still a lot of copies for this particular book out there. I mean, CGC Census 9/8 have 178. Let's assume that that number can get up to 200. There's got to be some raw comics out there. There's got to be some crack and press candidates for the 9/6. 200 copies, that is sort of around the census range for 9/8s for Punisher and Wolverine and books like that. And we've seen that, those values have a hard time keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, where the Wolverine book was selling at $130,000 at one point and kind of now taps out around that $60,000 to $70,000 range at the 9/8 level. So that is something definitely to consider if you are somebody thinking about, selling that book. I mean, granted, again, there is the sequel next year. There is the potential of Miles Morales being in live action universes, and those are going to be counterbalancing factors to, the macroeconomic pressures that we see with that book. But, if you're somebody who has the ability to take a profit, nobody ever went broke taking a profit. But let us finish out the conversation with, this idea of the pendulum swinging. I still think that we are starting to feel that in the comic book market. It's like the comic book market everyone used to buy off of the trailer. Remember when that was a thing? Everyone would see the trailer and then would buy, the book. Or actually, I would rewind the clock even more. The movie would come out and people used to buy after the movie because they were excited about it. And then it moved to the trailer would come out and people would buy, because they were excited about the trailer. And then it would come out that, people would buy during the announcement, even before the trailer, because they wanted to get in front of it. And then it kind of reversed where people were actually selling, because the movies weren't very, very popular. And now we've kind of gone full circle to where people are now buying once again after the movie, once their interest has actually been restored or their faith has been restored in the IP. And I think that very, very soon, after a few more hits, we're going to see that pendulum swing once again, and people are going to start buying off of the trailers in a big way. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys see the movie? What do you guys think about Ultimate Fallout 4 right now, the hottest book in the comic book market? Do you guys think this is going to the moon? Would you sell your Georgevich variant for an AF15? Rather, would you sell your AF15 to pick up a 9.8 Georgevich variant? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's all I got. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next video.